Okay, we're at the Idaho Museum of Natural History here on the ISU campus in Pocatello, Idaho. Here's our bison symbol that I'll mention a few times for the museum. I'm going to take you guys inside. I'm going to show you the collections downstairs, talk about the animals we've mentioned in class, and I'll quickly show you some of the exhibits. We are at the Idaho Museum of Natural History here on the campus of Idaho State University in Pocatello. And what I'm going to do for class today, I'm going to walk you guys through the collections down here, talk about the fossils that we store here. So the Idaho Museum of Natural History, this is the official natural history museum for the state of Idaho. It's where we store fossils and artifacts for research related to the state of Idaho. What is behind me right now is just an example of what we have. This is a skull of bison latifrons. This is an Ice Age animal from about 20,000 to 100,000 years ago. It is actually the symbol of the museum. The Idaho Museum of Natural History stores tens of thousands of specimens. Most of our fossil collection consists of Ice Age fossils from near Pocatello. Things such as a giant ground sloth, saber-toothed cat, bison, and horse, and muskox. Also here we have our fossil dinosaurs that I work on, our giant helicoprion shark. What I'm going to do is go through the collections here, talk about these animals, and show you examples of fossils from each of them. We're going to start off with some of the oldest fossils that we have in the museum collections here. So I'm going to be off camera for a minute so I don't look so awkward, as my daughter just mentioned. So we're starting off with, here is a helicoprion tooth. In class we have talked about the shark helicoprion. The Idaho Museum of Natural History has one of the largest collections of helicoprion teeth in the world. Southeast Idaho is the best spot in the world to find them out of the Phosphoria Formation. If you guys remember, we'll just kind of go through and let you see some details on this. So here's our ruler scale. Here is a large helicoprion tooth. This is a monster. Let's just do a quick measurement here. About 45-50 centimeters across, this tooth whorl right here. This guy is amazing. Just to give you an idea, we have lots of specimens of helicoprion, as I mentioned. Here's a small little tooth whorl. Here is a partial tooth whorl right here. We just have an amazing collection. These specimens, here's another here. These come out of those phosphate mines again near Soda Springs, about 280 million years old. If you guys have a chance, we have some of these on exhibit. I would suggest coming up and looking at these exhibits here once this is post-quarantine and you can. Hi, you guys remember talking about marine reptiles and ichthyosaurs. So we have evidence for these things in Idaho. Unfortunately, it's really crappy so far, but let me give you some examples. So these are from rocks about 248 million years old. We have a few bones of an ichthyosaur. Here's a vertebra from one of these ichthyosaurs. It's about the biggest vertebra we have. We have a few other vertebrae from ichthyosaurs right here. This is all probably from the same individual found down in the Bear Lake area. Here is part of maybe a humerus, upper arm bone to an ichthyosaur. That's really about it. We've got a few vertebrae, random bone fragments. However, there's hints of these things being much more common than we know of so far here in Idaho. I have a friend that found a very large ichthyosaur humerus down near Bear Lake, and I'm hoping to get some funding to do a research project looking for some of these ichthyosaurs. But we do have evidence for a few marine reptiles from the Triassic here in Idaho, as well as fish. But I'm hoping to find something a lot more showy than these scrappy little bones here. So they're still pretty cool. Along with these ichthyosaurs, in the same series of rocks here in Idaho, we have found occasional fossil shark teeth. So these are from a shark called a hybodont. See the scale here, they're not very big. They're not quite an inch long, even maybe 2 centimeters long. But to give you an idea, we do have shark teeth from Idaho. These are some of the first fossils I ever found as a fossil hunting kid. Unfortunately, they're not super well preserved. I tried to prepare them the best I could, but they do not prepare very well out of the rock. But we did have sharks swimming along with these ichthyosaurs about 248 million years ago. Okay, Idaho dinosaurs. So this is what the bread and butter of my research is at the moment. So I've mentioned in class we find a lot of Arictodromeus dinosaurs. Those are the most common dinosaurs found here in Idaho. There's not a lot of evidence for animals larger than a ricto that I'll show you in just a minute, but I'll show you a few of the bones that we have that come from larger dinosaurs. Here's a tailbone from maybe something similar to Iguanodon is my best guess, and he's still not super big. This would be maybe a horse-sized animal, but it is something that's not Arictodromeus. This is from near the base of the tail. There's evidence for a larger dinosaur from Idaho. Here's a toe bone from some sort of meat-eating dinosaur. I would absolutely love to know exactly what sort, but since it's just a toe bone, we can't say very much about what it is from. My guess, it'd either be from one of the giant oviraptorosaurs that laid these giant eggs we've talked about in class, or maybe an animal similar to Allosaurus. Other big bones, like I say, there's not much. Here we go. Here's the end of a leg bone to a large meat-eating dinosaur. We can tell it's a meat eater because it's hollow. So you've got the whole, what's left of this really crappy leg bone fragment. We've got this hollow portion in the middle. This is probably the kneecap, maybe the end of a femur right here. Again, maybe to one of those oviraptorosaurs or something similar to Allosaurus. But this is as good as the big dinosaur bones from Idaho get so far. They're really crappy. It's hard to tell what exactly the bones are coming from. And then for reasons that we talked about in class, we tend to find a lot of nice Arictodromeus cells. Alright, we're looking at Arictodromeus now. This is my dinosaur baby. This is my cute little dead dinosaur friend. This is a dinosaur I did my undergrad research on a little bit, my master's, and then I finished my PhD working on Arictodromeus. This is a burrowing dinosaur. Really, really common compared to anything else in the dinosaur-bearing rocks of Idaho. This is a thigh bone. This is the left thigh bone right here. This is the head of the femur, the thigh bone that would fit into the socket. Here's the knee joint. Give you an idea of the size. These guys aren't big. They're the size of a medium-sized dog. But here is the thigh bone, and what's interesting is right here in the middle, this part that I'm outlining with my thumb is actually a reconstruction. The rest of the bone is real, but as part of my PhD research, we took a chunk of the bone out here to section it and look at it under a microscope to figure out how old this animal was. And off the top of my head, if I remember right, this animal was around 3 to 4 years old, the best that we could tell. So it wasn't fully grown up, it was maybe a teenage dinosaur, so to speak. Here's the thigh bone. This is part of a partial skeleton that I found, the first good Arictodromeus I found. Let me actually borrow the camera. I'm just going to take it here and show you this drawer. So you can see here, there's that thigh bone I just showed you. Here are tons and tons of tail vertebrae. So they're organized, going from the butt backwards. So here we are towards the butt of the animal. We're going farther back in the tail. You can see all these tail vertebrae. Some of them still in the rock. Here's 3 still in the rock. 1, 2, 3. This animal had greater than 55 vertebrae in the tail. It's ridiculous. About a 7-foot long tail for this animal. Other than Aricto, the most common dinosaur fossil we find here in Idaho are eggshell from a giant oviraptorosaur like we mentioned in class. So the best specimen is on loan to a museum in Boise right now. You can actually see 2 large eggs, but what we have right here are a bunch of smashed eggs, and they're not pretty looking, but I'm trying to highlight the texture with my cell phone light. But you can see eggshell right here. This looks like the end of an egg that was smushed. If you look right here, there is this dinosaur eggshell. It's called Macroelongutulithus. These eggs would get about 14, 15 inches long off the top of my head. They're ridiculously huge. If you look over here, this is all a mass of this Macroelongutulithus eggshell. It looks like we might have another end of an egg, and another end of an egg. These eggs were laid in pairs and they are huge. I will try and splice an image of these eggs into this video, but what we're looking at here is just a whole bunch of eggshell, all where I'm touching, from probably a crushed or trampled nest to giant Oviraptorosaurus. One of the most common, probably the most common animal, Ice Age fossil found in the Pocatello area is the bison. So you saw bison latifrons at the very beginning of this video. I'll show you some of those skulls again. Just to give you an idea of the size of these animals, here is one of the neck vertebrae from bison. It's hard to tell which species of bison it is when you just have a neck vertebrae, but you can imagine with those large horn that bison latifrons had to have huge neck vertebrae. So just to show you how common it is, you can see here we just have drawers and drawers and drawers of these fossils. Among the Ice Age fossils of Idaho from the Pocatello area, one of the most common you can find are fossil camels. And these are camel humeri, so forelimb elements. You can see right here. I just give you an idea of their size again. Here's my hand. These guys, camels, are not small. When you look at this, they're a little bit bigger than your average horse even, but you'll find lots of camel fossils near the Pocatello area. The genus name is Camelops. Right here, you're looking at the upside down skull of a giant ground sloth. So right here, you have the teeth. I do not dare pick this thing up. I am too nervous. You have the teeth. Here's the snout. Your eye is going to be back here. Your back of the skull is on the right side, way back there. I'm sorry it's not the best image, but I do not dare pick that thing up. It makes me too nervous. I'll show you guys some images. Hopefully I can splice into this video too. There's a giant ground sloth skull. Here is the jaw to a ground sloth. Look at these teeth. They're nice and peg-like. Okay? I'm going to try and get an upper view of them. There you can see them a little bit. What do you think this guy was eating? Okay? So ground sloths, they're some of my favorite Ice Age animals that we have at the museum here. You can see some more of their bones on the shelves down here. These guys are just freaky weird. Every time I think about them, I think how amazing it would be to see one alive, and also how much they probably smelled bad. So I'm going to walk you through some of the other Pleistocene animals here, starting with this ground sloth, and we'll go through some others. Okay, you'll forgive me if I do a little bit more giant sloth love here. So, just to give you an idea of the size of these animals again. Here is your scapula, your shoulder blade to a giant ground sloth. Here's my hand, by the way. It has absolute ridiculous size. I love these giant ground sloths. Mammoth kneecap, just because it's cool. My daughter said it's the same shape as my head. She's a really good kid. Yeah. So, here's a mammoth kneecap. So here's your kneecap. Just because I want to show you the ridiculous size, here's a mammoth kneecap. This is the outside, the face outside. This would be towards the actual joint with the bones right there. Another chunk of a mammoth. So either a mammoth or mastodon. You can't tell without the teeth. Probably mammoth. You just call them proboscideans. This is part of the thigh bone of a mammoth. So your femur right here. Just to show you a ridiculous size, and you'll see some skulls in a minute. This is just the top little part of a mammoth femur. It is about half the size of my daughter. This also resembles her head. Hey, we're looking at saber-toothed cat now. Here's a Smilodon jaw. So carnivores are not nearly as common as herbivore fossils, but out here in the Pocatello area, we will find saber-toothed cat fossils. Here's a partial jaw for one. Very carefully. Here's the back of the skull to a Smilodon. Here's where it would connect to the vertebrae in the neck. Here's where you have some powerful muscles attached for its jaws. A thigh bone. You remember the giant mammoth thigh bone we looked at a minute ago? Here's a thigh bone from a saber-toothed cat. Looks like it's even had a little tiny piece taken out for some sort of constructive analysis. It's called maybe looking at isotopes in the bone or age of the animal, something like that. So we have saber-toothed cats. We also have a large panther called Panthera atrox. Here's a humerus to Panthera atrox. So it's this bone right here. So we had these two big cats in Idaho about 10,000 plus years ago. Another interesting predator we had from the Ice Age of Idaho. This is called Arctodus simus. This is the giant short-faced bear. I wish you could see the skeleton that we have mounted upstairs in the collection. Maybe I can dig up some images to add into this video. We have a partial skeleton of this monster bear. I have an awesome image, I think, of my son running from the skeleton, if I can find that too. But you can look right here in the drawers. You can see this partial skeleton. It's all from one individual. Just to give you an idea of the size of the bear, I mean, here's one vertebra. I'm going to guesstimate as a dinosaur person, this is a lumbar vertebrae towards the midsection or farther back in the back. But just to give you an idea of the size, this is one vertebra of this animal. This guy is bigger than your normal bear. He's not Yogi. Okay? Ooh, jaw with tooth. Here you go too. Okay? To give you an idea, this is just a partial jaw. This guy is a killer. I would love to set him loose in a backyard and watch him do things. Okay, I just want to show you some of the coolest big Ice Age stuff we have here to kind of recap what you've seen. So here is a mammoth jaw. Here's a tooth that's erupted. What you're seeing right here is a tooth that is not yet erupted. So this tooth is going to come down this way, and it's eventually going to push this tooth out. But right now you've got that tooth growing. The bone has been cut away so we can see that tooth inside the actual mammoth jaw. Here is a giant ground sloth skull I forgot about. It's a little bit easier to see. So he's missing his teeth. Here's the back of the skull, which is called the zygomatic arch. His eye is going to be right here, and his snout right here. This is a giant ground sloth. These guys, I just love them to death. They're awesome. Here's a fossil camel skull. You can get a few different views of that. So you guys saw some of the camel limb bones, but here's a nice camel skull. Here's a ground sloth lower jaw, the mandible. You can see these big, simple peg-like teeth again on this animal. You guys saw the giant bison latifrons at the beginning of the video. Here is another bison upper skull, and this is bison antiquus. Antiquus is defined by these much shorter horns. Latifrons has the long horns. You'll see another one in just a second. Another cool skull. Game of Thrones, dire wolves. If you know these things here. Here's a dire wolf skull from southeastern Idaho. This is the actual fossil. It is extremely cool. We had dire wolves in Idaho during the Ice Age. Let's see. Some muskox skulls down here. Find these in easternmost Idaho in some areas. They're fairly common. These are muskox skulls. Okay, more big guys. Okay? Once again, here's bison latifrons. Look at the ridiculous spread on the horn cores here. You can have a 9-foot spread on these cores, horn cores. One thing to remember too is this is the inner core of that. You're going to have more keratin, kind of like your fingernail on a sheath, making these horns even longer. What else we got? There's a bison latifron skull I started out with here. Give you another look at that. And to wrap it up, as far as the collections, just mammoth limb bones. Here's a full mammoth femur. Right here to give you an idea of the size again. I'm going to estimate between 4+ feet long. I'm not good at estimating, but you can see the size here. This guy is huge. There it looks like a mammoth humerus behind there. So we here at the Idaho Museum of Natural History have such an amazing collection of different fossils. It's great for researchers. It's great to come and see the exhibits that we have. So you guys have seen all the pretty prepped fossils that I showed you in those videos. I wanted to show you the dirty prep lab, it's called. This is where we prepare fossils out of the rock, out of the mud, out of the sediment, and get them to look nice and pretty so we can actually see all their anatomical features. What you're seeing right here, this is a fossil ankylosaur, an armored dinosaur I'm doing a research project on, and you can see how awful the rock is right now. I mean, there's bones in this rock you're looking at now. There's a little bit of a paper towel and TP stuck to it from the field collection still. Here's a armor scoop from the dinosaur in the rock. Here is, I don't know what, maybe a rib or part of a limb. Here is a tail vertebra from this armored dinosaur. Another tail vertebra here. Look how beat up this poor thing is. This is what you have to deal with when you're a paleontologist. Before you get the nice pretty bones, you're going to have your bones collected from the field that can be in hundreds or thousands of pieces, and you've got to get the rock off of them, you've got to get them glued together, you've got to get them cleaned so you can look at all their features. Here's another tailbone right here. Someone's working on a chunk of muskox right here. The tools that we use, so we've got a big air compressor. The air compressor is going to give us an air supply, and we're going to use small air-powered tools like this that are basically like tiny jackhammers. It's called an air scribe that will clean the rock off the fossil. You can use that. You can use dental picks, toothbrushes, depends how hard the rock is or the sediment around the fossil. I have found it is always nice to do this under a microscope unless it is a ridiculously huge bone, because I myself, I'm not as skilled as I'd like to be. If I do it under a microscope, the fossils come out a lot better. Here, this is the short-faced bear. This is Arctodus. I'm going to ask my daughter to carefully crawl under that rope and stand next to it so you can see the actual size of the animal and get a comparison of it. Because I can't do it while videoing. Okay, and so you know, she's taller than me. She's about 6 feet tall. Okay, this is a short-faced bear. This is Arctodus. Scientists debate right now how much of a predator it was compared to scavenger. Some say it was too clumsy to hunt. The jury's still out on that. Either way, I think this is something that could probably mess with the human pretty good. So this is your Arctodus. It lived from about 2 million years ago to 12,500 years ago. You guys saw that partial skeleton we had downstairs. I was drooling over the Smilodon because everybody likes the saber-toothed cats. Here is our nice saber-toothed cat mount. You can see it next to the Arctodus for scale here. Downstairs I showed you guys some jaws and skulls and femora from this guy. Saber-toothed cats lived in North and South America from about 1.8 million to 10,000 years ago. Bison latifrons. Okay, I'm going to ask my daughter to stand next to that again for scale. She's going to kill me after this, but it'll give you an idea of the size of the animal. So here's your bison latifrons. Remember, they can get up to a 9-foot horn core spread. It's our bison latifrons here. This is an awesome mount. Again, this is a symbol of the museum that we have here. Hagerman horse. You guys know the Hagerman horse from Hagerman fossil beds. About 3 million years old. Here's a nice mounted skeleton of the Hagerman horse. You can see my daughter thrilled, standing kind of close to it still for scale. So here's some of our Pleistocene Ice Age fossil animals we talked about downstairs. I'm just going to walk right over to a ricto and show you my little dinosaur BB here. Alright, a ricto, I mentioned, is the most common dinosaur from Idaho. We mentioned in class he's a burrowing animal. Here he is. So he's about the size of a medium-sized dog. You can see my hand next to his skull. He's not super huge. We mentioned in class as well that specimens have been found where you have the adults with the babies. So when we designed the skeletal mount, we wanted to make an adult with a baby. Let me step back here, get the full skeleton in. There you go. So this is your little crash course tour via video on the IMNH collections. Hopefully this helps you guys for your assignment. Let me know what questions you may have.